Hello, my name's Host Eric, host Talking with Famous People, and I would like to talk about ways of helping the world, / ways of understanding the world, / ways in which paradigms have shifted so that we understand things differently than we used to understand them. The first part being, when we enter a given epoch, or however you say that word, a given period of history, when we're born, we don't understand at all at first, obviously, how to contextualize that. It's just sort of where we are, and before we were born was back in the times of history that we don't know about, and then after we're born is when the universe occurs. They say no. And then as we get older, we start to contextualize things a little bit more, both in terms of our own life. Like for me, I can contextualize the current state of affairs in the world against the Cold War, which I remember clearly enough, and against like apartheid and stuff like that, which I have as reference points in my own news that happened during my lifetime. So, additionally, of course, I've learned a bunch of news that happened before my lifetime, and I can reference that as well. Now, I've seen the political climate in the country change, and I think most people would say that, like, for example, a lot of people are trying to interpret the groundswell support for Trump as indicative of a dumbing down of the population. I would reject that thesis myself. And I would say that is because the political candidates and the way the political process don't reflect anything meaningful about the way the population is. Trump is not the candidate anyone would have chosen had they had a open field of candidates to choose from, each of whom had a fair and equal opportunity to present themselves to the assembled masses. And I think really that's the critical thing, is that we have how many 100 million people in America? We are not actually allowing most of them to have a legitimate shot at being president. And I think that hurts the country, right? So we want to get the best people, not the people who have the political whatever. So when I look at the country, I don't see a country that is worse than it was before. I see a country that's fundamentally better than it was before. I see a country that's more fair, that's not, it doesn't do as badly as once it did the grouping thing, where it takes a group of people and says, you people are worthless and we're going to dismiss you and we're going to treat you like shit. And certainly that was the case when I was growing up with gay people, or that was open and accepted, openly and acceptable. It was open and acceptable hate, right? So like you watch Eddie Murphy's Delirious and all the homophobic stuff in there and whatever, and it was just considered all good fun because, of course, that's not like being racist. Being racist is bad, Eric, because people can't help the race they're born with or whatever. They're just born that way, and every individual is different. But homosexuality is just fucking disgusting, so don't even talk about it. Like, that's sort of the attitude that I would get when I was a kid about it. If it came up, which it didn't. It never came up, except as a pejorative thing that you called your friends, or that they called you, or that your not friends called you, or whatever. So I see an evolution in society that comes from a couple of different places. Number one, I see it as a shift in information fluidity, first and foremost. That we have better information fluidity now than we ever had before. We have more media coverage of more different kind of things. We have a legitimate, actual chance to see things that otherwise we might have read about but not had any visual image of. And that helps immensely, because a lot of people, for them to appreciate the moral outrage of a thing, they have to visually see it. And then of course, though, the good thing about that is when they have reference points to as when they have examples to reference, you can then, in theory, at least utilize that shared cultural consciousness of events and videos and stuff like that people have seen, and say, well, this one is not on video, but it's like that. So we see big changes occurring in the way law enforcement deals with the communities in general, and the level of accountability that they're beginning to be held to a little bit more anyway. We see all that kind of stuff. At the same time, we don't see as clearly delineated a division in the world as we did when I grew up with the Cold War, with the Russian bloc on one side and us on the other side, and that was it. China was a little brother of, or a little cousin that Russia kept safe behind their cloaks. It wasn't a superpower at all. So, in fact, they didn't, I remember in the 70s, you'd occasionally see a few pictures coming out of Red China. It was always referred to as Red China. And it would show massive city, a whole population of people all riding a bicycle because nobody had any cars. And now, of course, we don't have those clear hegemons. The United States still positions itself as a global hegemon, but we are positioned against Russia and China, and our alliances with Europe are getting more frayed, at least dissolving into mush on the sides, because I think one disadvantage of a pro-diversity and more open-minded America is a more relativistic America. So I think there's still a stage to go in general, and that stage is to take the American thinker, average American thinker, from either a period of intolerance into a period of tolerance, or ideally from a period of tolerance into a period of principle. And I think post-principle is functionally meaningless in public policy. We can talk about the specifics of executing compromises from principle, but it's going to be hard to meaningfully address any problem without at least agreeing on a default core framework that we start with. Let's start by addressing the issue of rights violations. Would be my prescriptive mechanism, right? And then if we need to deviate from that, if we need to say, okay, well, this problem's too important. It's really important we give everybody health care, Eric. Okay, well, let's figure out how to make that happen in the least rights violating and most effective way possible, rather than some massive bloated compromise that doesn't do anything worthwhile. So that's my thoughts on helping the world, is basically this. If we can get people to evaluate arguments fairly, then bad ideas go away. And to get them to evaluate arguments fairly is to provide them with the tools to do so, and the experience to put it in a frame of reference so that they can understand why it's meaningful. And that's my thoughts on that. Thanks for watching Talk with Famous People.